1982 budget itself, totaling $695.5 billion, would still be the largest in history. What the president is doing is not reducing the size of government. He is simply trying to slow down the growth of government, and that is a new direction in America, not followed since before FDR in the 1930s. His plan is this: $41 billion in spending cuts, $44 billion in income tax cuts, $10 billion in business tax cuts, all combining, he says, to reduce inflation from 12% to 6%, create 3 million new jobs, and balance the budget by 1984. So I turn to Irving R. Levine, who is an expert in economics and tax policy, and ask him, is this enough?
Well, Roger, I think a very good case can be made that it is enough, and certainly administration officials argue and present figures to bolster the case, saying that it is enough to achieve the desired results, but they quickly add a number of ifs. If business will make the investments in new equipment to increase productivity, investments which are encouraged by the increased depreciation allowances which the president proposes, if people will put a good portion of their tax cut into savings rather than spending it all, and if investors are convinced that the president's program will work and are willing to make investments at a lower interest rate, if all of these things fall into place, then it could achieve the desired results of more jobs, less inflation, a more prosperous economy. But the president was quick to add that all of this will take time at best.
Irv, if you take the average American family, which is a man, wife, and 4 children earning $20,000 to $25,000, what is the immediate effect on that family of what the president laid out tonight if it goes through?
Well, the immediate effect is really not much. The tax savings would be a bit over $100 in the first year. It would go to about $800 in the fourth year. Now, the president and his advisors make an argument to defend the fact that the larger benefit in this tax cut program falls to the affluent people in society, because the family of 4 with $100,000 a year income would get a tax saving of close to $7,000 in the fourth year. And the belief is that while the low-income family would have to put all of its tax cut, all of its tax saving into paying for price of food, fuel, and so on, the more affluent American family would be able to put this tax cut into savings. And this savings could be used by industry to borrow, to invest in new equipment, to help the country become more productive. And that is a defense for the tax cut favoring the rich.
Irv, Tom Pettit, who covers Capitol Hill for NBC, is ready with some quick reaction on this budget message. Tom?
Congressman Jimmy Jones of the House Budget Committee is here, and we'd like to find out what you think the prospects are of approval of these tax cuts in this form by the end of this year.
I think there's going to be some discussion on the tax cuts in this form. As far as the spending cuts are concerned, I think most of what he is recommending is doable. But as far as the tax cuts are concerned, I think there may be some disagreements as to the precise part of it. A lot of Democrats feel we should not have a tax cut quite that large because it would create too high a deficits, but we do agree that we need to have investment incentives.
Do you think that large a tax cut would be inflationary?
Yes, I think so, particularly if it were not offset by equally sized spending cuts.
So it would suggest to us that in view of what Speaker O'Neill has been saying and what you're saying now, that the tax cut proposal is very likely to be changed in either the House or the Senate or both.
I think that's going to be a major battleground, but I think overall you're going to find Democrats in the House being very cooperative with the new administration.
All right, while we continue with that, Senator Byrd is here, if he'd come in, and I think Senator Jesse Helms, both of whom have been following this pretty carefully. Senator, I'll give you that. How about that? Senator, what do you make of the question of whether these tax cuts will go through in their present form?
Well, we Democrats in the Senate will support a tax cut, but we will not support the 10% across the board cut over a period of 3 years. We feel this is an inflationary tax cut. We will support a tax cut that is fair and equitable and that does not favor the high-income people disproportionately to the lower and middle-income people.
Sounds to me, Senator.
And one that will induce greater productivity.
It sounds to me, Senator, as if the Democrats are trying to draw the line right now.
The Democrats voted against this type of tax cut last year when the Republicans attempted to attach it to the debt limit extension bill. It's the Kemp-Roth proposal. And we opposed it then, we oppose it now, for the reason that we don't think it's equitable and fair across the board to the lower and middle income people. We think it's inflationary, and we think it favors the rich.
Senator Helms, it's your turn with the microphone to respond to that. The Democrats plan to propose a different kind of tax cut. Now, I heard you saying today you didn't think the president went far enough with his proposals today.
Well, I said it was good as far as it went. And I think you may find a number of moves on both sides of Congress to cut even further in some of the programs. We're going to find out what the will of the American people is, and we're going to find out what the guts of the Congress is. So it's just as simple as that. We can make all the excuses in the world, but what we know is we've got an inflation rate that is ruining this country. And the question is, are we going to try to do something about it?
But Speaker O'Neill said yesterday in this now highly quoted remark of his, haste makes waste, and that he intends to look at everything very, very carefully, as do Democrats, I think, in both houses. Don't you think haste makes waste, Senator?
Well, I'll tell you, if you look at some of the government programs, lack of haste makes waste, too, and that's precisely what the president was talking about tonight.
What do you say as to the passage of the tax cut by the end of this year? Your leader, Senator Baker, said late this afternoon he thinks it may be next year before a tax cut goes through.
Well, we'll see. I don't have a crystal ball. We'll do the best we can.
Well, how about your guess, Senator?
I don't guess. I just try to work.
All right. What's your estimate, Senator Byrd?
I think that we will be able to enact a tax cut this year, but I think that it ought to go somewhat hand in hand with the reductions in federal spending. I don't think it ought to go along because a tax cut of the kind that Mr. Reagan has proposed is going to be inflationary. It's going to result in a greatly increased deficit. So I think we have to take a look. It's a very complex issue and study it carefully.
Well, I'm sure that'll be true in the House. Thanks very much, Congressman. We must leave now. We thank you, we thank you, we thank you, and now here's Roger.
As Irving R. Levine has already pointed out, of course, the administration itself is prepared to take somewhat less than it's asked for this evening. So now we have many of the specifics of Ronald Reagan's new beginning, and with this speech, the president is really entering the first stage of his critical testing. According to recent public opinion polls, most Americans feel Ronald Reagan has indeed taken charge of the government and is in command, which is what they found lacking in Jimmy Carter. Now what the public wants to see is whether the new president can carry through on his major campaign promises of bringing inflation and unemployment and federal spending under control. It will not be quick, it will not be easy. For Tom Pettit and Irving R. Levine, I'm Roger Mudd, NBC News, Washington.